Today we are going to read a short story called The Face on the Wall by E.V. Lucas. Module 2-ലുള്ള സ്റ്റോറിയാണ് The Face on the Wall. E.V. Lucas was a famous English writer. The Face on the Wall is his most famous story. He was interested in the curious, the human, and the ridiculous. If he were offered a story, his mind instantly shaped it with wit and form. He read a character with wisdom and turned it to fun. So in his stories, there is this element of humor. There is an element of the supernatural. Supernatural എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എന്താണ്? Beyond natural. Natural worldന് അതീതമായിട്ടുള്ളത്. സോ ഒരു സൂപ്പർ നാച്ചുറൽ എലമെന്റ് ഉള്ള ഒരു സ്റ്റോറിയാണ് ഇത്. അതേ സമയത്ത് തന്നെ ഇതൊരു ഫണ്ണി സ്റ്റോറിയുമാണ്. So let's begin the story. We were talking of events which cannot be explained by natural causes at Dabney's last evening. Dabney is the name of a person and he is conducting a party. ആ പാർട്ടിയിൽ ആൾക്കാർ എന്താണ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്? They are discussing supernatural events. Supernatural events ആണ് അവർ ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. We were talking of events which cannot be explained by natural causes at Dabney's last evening. Most of us had given an instance means example, without producing much effect. Among the strangers to me was a little man with an anxious face. So it's a group of strangers and they are all discussing supernatural events. Supernatural കഥകൾ പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. So among the strangers to me was a little man with an anxious face. Anxious means worried, troubled. He watched each speaker with the closest attention but said nothing. So there is this little man who is listening to their conversation but he isn't saying anything. ഒന്നും പറയാതെ ഇങ്ങനെ ശ്രദ്ധിച്ച് കേട്ടോണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. Then Dabney turned to him and asked if he had no experience he could narrate. He thought for a moment. Well, he said, not a story in the ordinary sense of the word. Truth is not only stranger than a made-up story, but also greatly more interesting. I could tell you an occurrence which happened to me personally and which, strangely enough, completed itself only this afternoon. We begged him to begin. So what does the person say? He says he's not going to tell a story. He's not going to narrate a story. Narrate means tell. He's not going to narrate a story. He's going to tell the truth. He's going to tell them a true experience. And that experience happened to him only that afternoon. എനിക്ക് ശരിക്കും ഉണ്ടായ ഒരു അനുഭവമാണ് പറയാൻ പോകുന്നതെന്ന് ഇയാൾ പറയുന്നു. So there is a group of people narrating supernatural experiences. ഒരു കൂട്ടം ആൾക്കാർ ഇരുന്ന് supernatural stories പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. അതിനിടയിൽ ഒരാൾ എന്ത് പറയുന്നു? ഞാൻ എനിക്ക് സ്വന്തമായിട്ടുണ്ടായ ഒരു അനുഭവം പറയാം എന്ന് പറയുന്നു. What were Dabney and his men talking about? Question number 1. We were talking about supernatural experiences, about events that cannot be explained by natural causes. Why did the little man say that his was an unusual story? First of all, because he says it was a true story. It can't be explained and it was completed only that day. അന്നാണ് അത് complete ആയത്. They begged whom to begin and what. The little man with the anxious face who wanted to speak of an occurrence that happened to him. A year or two ago, he said, I was in rooms in an old house in Great Ormond Street. The bedroom walls had been painted, but the place was damp and there were great patches on the walls. So he begins the story. He says he lived in a little house in Ormond Street. Ormond Street ഒരു സ്ഥലത്തിൻ്റെ പേരാണ്. അവിടെയുള്ളൊരു വീട്ടിലാണ് ഇയാൾ ജീവിച്ചിരുന്നത്. The walls had been painted, but there were damp patches on the walls. നനഞ്ഞ patches ഉണ്ട്. Damp means നനയുക. One of these was exactly like a face. In fact, the strange thing was that while the patches on the wall grew larger and changed their shapes, this never did. So there were damp patches on the wall. പല patches ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു, നനഞ്ഞ പോലത്തെ patches ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. Out of these, one was like a face. One of the patches was like a face. The other patches changed shape and size, but this patch did not change at all. ബാക്കിയുള്ള patches എല്ലാം മാറിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നു, ഇത് മാത്രം മാറുന്നില്ല. It was shaped like a face. While there, I fell in with influenza. Influenza is ജലദോഷം. And all day long, I had nothing to do but read or think, and it was then that the face began to get a firmer hold of me. So he is watching this face very closely. ജലദോഷം പിടിച്ച് കിടക്കുകയാണ്, അപ്പോൾ he is watching this face very closely. He is watching it every day, and he gets obsessed with this face. It filled my thoughts day and night. There was a curious curve of the nose. Curious means strange, unusual. There was a curious curve of the nose, and the forehead was remarkable. In fact, the face of an uncommon man, a man in 1,000. So ഇയാൾ ഈ ഫേസ് തന്നെ വീണ്ടും വീണ്ടും നോക്കിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നു, and he feels that it is remarkable. Remarkable means extraordinary, unbelievable. It is not an ordinary man, it's a man in 1,000. He feels that this face is a remarkable, a rare, an extraordinary face. It is the face of a man in 1,000. So എന്താണ് സംഭവിക്കുന്നത്? ഇദ്ദേഹം ചുമരിൽ ഒരു ഫേസ് കാണുന്നു, and he gets obsessed with that face. He looks at the face day and night. Where did the narrator stay? He stayed in Great Ormond Street. This is a place in England. What was peculiar about the room? The bedroom walls were painted but damp with great patches. There were great damp patches on the walls. What did he see on the wall? He saw a face. One of the patches looked exactly like a face, and it never changed. Occurrence means event, sambhavam. Well, I got better. So he recovered from the influenza. But the face still controlled me. I found myself searching the streets for one like it. So he began to search for this particular man. ഇയാൾക്ക് വേണ്ടി സെർച്ച് ചെയ്യാൻ തുടങ്ങി. Somewhere I was convinced. I was sure. I was convinced. എനിക്ക് ഉറപ്പായി. The real man must exist, and him I must meet. Why, I had no idea. I only knew that he and I were in some way linked by fate. So now he wanted to find the real man. He was sure that this face belonged to a real man, and he wanted to find that real man, real person. I often went to places where people gather in large numbers, political meetings, football matches, and railway stations, but all in vain. Without success. In vain means without success. So ഇയാൾ എന്താണ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്? ഇയാൾ ആൾക്കാർ കൂടുതലുള്ള സ്ഥലങ്ങളിലൊക്കെ പോകാൻ തുടങ്ങി. പൊളിറ്റിക്കൽ മീറ്റിംഗ്സ്, ഫുട്ബോൾ മാച്ചസ്, റെയിൽവേ സ്റ്റേഷൻസ് എല്ലായിടത്തും പോയി ഇയാൾ ഈ ഫേസ് ഉള്ള ആരെങ്കിലും കണ്ടുപിടിക്കാനായിട്ട് ശ്രമിക്കുകയാണ്. He began to look for the real man with a face similar to the face on his wall. And for that he went to places where people gathered in large numbers. The search became a madness with me. I neglected everything else. Neglect means not pay attention to something. So he neglected everything else. This became his sole activity. He began to look for this person. Now let's take a look at the questions. What was remarkable about the face that appeared on the wall? The face had a curious curve of the nose, a remarkable forehead, which made him look like that of an uncommon man. I neglected everything else. Why? Because he was looking for a man whose face matched the face on the wall. But it was in vain. It was without any success. He did not succeed. So he neglected everything else and continued the search. He passed his hand over his brow as if he was very tired. And then, he continued, I at last saw him. He was in a taxi driving east along Piccadilly. Piccadilly is the name of a place. I turned and ran beside it for a little way, and then saw an empty one coming. Follow that taxi, I said, and leaped in. The driver managed to keep it in sight, and it took us to Charing Cross. Charing Cross is a big railway station. This is a junction in central London. You can see a picture of Charing Cross here. Charing Cross here. It is a big railway station. So what happened here? He saw this man in a taxi, so he followed the taxi and he reached the railway station. ഇയാള് ഈ സെയിം ഫേസ് ഉള്ള ഒരാളെ കാണുന്നു, അയാളെ ഫോളോ ചെയ്ത് എവിടെ എത്തുന്നു? ഒരു റെയിൽവേ സ്റ്റേഷനിൽ എത്തുന്നു. ആൻഡ് വിച്ച് റെയിൽവേ സ്റ്റേഷൻ? Charing Cross. I rushed on the platform and found my man with two ladies and a little girl. They were going to France. So he finally found the man, and he was with two ladies and a little girl. Where were they going? They were all going to France. I stayed there trying to get a word with him, but in vain. Other friends had joined the party and they moved to the train in one group. Now they all boarded the train. He and his friends all boarded a train. എല്ലാവരും ഒരു ട്രെയിനിൽ കയറി. So, look at the questions. I at last saw him. Who is the I here? The I is the narrator. കഥ പറയുന്ന ആൾ. Why did the narrator follow the taxi? He saw the man whose face was etched on his wall in a taxi driving east. That is why he followed the taxi. I hastily purchased a ticket to Folkestone, hoping that I should catch him on the boat before it sailed. But at Folkestone, he got on the ship before me with his friends, and they disappeared into a large private cabin. So Folkestone is a watery place. Folkestone is a watery place. You can see a picture of Folkestone on this slide. Folkestone's picture ആണ് താഴെ കൊടുത്തിരിക്കുന്നത്. I hastily purchased a ticket to Folkestone. Hastily means quickly, പെട്ടെന്ന്. Why did he purchase a ticket to Folkestone? Because the man got into a boat at Folkestone. But then he got into a ship. Then the man got into a ship and with his friends, and they disappeared into a large private cabin. So what did the man do? He got into a ship with his friends. Again I was defeated, but I was determined to go with him, feeling certain that when the voyage had begun, he would leave the ladies and come out for a walk on the deck. Deck is the deck of a ship, the open upper floor of a ship. So this man, the narrator, also got into the ship and he was waiting for the man to come out. The man and his friends went into a cabin. Cabin എന്താണ്? ഒരു small room ആണ്. So this man is, the narrator is waiting for them to come out. അവർ പുറത്ത് വരാൻ വേണ്ടി വെയിറ്റ് ചെയ്യാണ്, so that he can talk to the man. I had only just enough for a single fare to Boulogne, but nothing could stop me now. I took up my position opposite his cabin door and waited. So he is waiting for that man. After half an hour, the door opened and he came out, but with the little girl. My heart beat fast. There was no mistaking the face. Every line was the same. Same to what? Same as what? Same as the face on his bedroom wall. അയാളുടെ വാളിലുള്ള സെയിം ഫേസ് തന്നെയാണ് ഇയാൾക്കും ഉള്ളത്. He looked at me and moved towards the way to the upper deck. It was now or never, I felt. So ഇപ്പോഴാണ് ഇയാളുടെ അടുത്ത് സംസാരിക്കാൻ പറ്റിയ ഒരു അവസരം. It was now or never. I have to talk to him. Why couldn't the author catch the man at Folkestone? Because the man he was following got into the train to Folkestone with his friends. And then at Folkestone, what happened? He got into a ship with his friends and disappeared into a cabin. Chart the journey undertaken by the narrator to contact the man on the wall. He went from Piccadilly to Charing Cross to Folkestone and finally to Boulogne. He went to all these places. ഇയാൾ പിക്കാഡിലിയിൽ വെച്ചിട്ടാണ് അയാളെ കാണുന്നത്. അവിടെ ഒരു ടാക്സിയിൽ കയറി അയാളെ ഫോളോ ചെയ്യുന്നു. അങ്ങനെ എവിടെ എത്തുന്നു? ചാറിങ് ക്രോസ് എന്ന് പറയുന്ന റെയിൽവേ സ്റ്റേഷനിൽ എത്തുന്നു. ആ റെയിൽവേ സ്റ്റേഷനിൽ നിന്ന് ഹി ഗോസ് ടു ഫോക്സ്റ്റോൺ. അവിടെ നിന്ന് ദേ ബോർഡ് എ ഷിപ്പ് and the ship is traveling to Boulogne. So that is the journey undertaken by the narrator in order to follow this particular man whose face is on his bedroom wall. 13th question. My heart beat fast. Why? Why did his heart beat fast? Because the man came out of the cabin and the narrator saw him up close, and every line on his face was the same as the face on his wall. So he had to talk to him and find out who he was. He was very curious because every line on his face was the same as the face on his wall. It was exactly the same person. Excuse me, I stammered, but do you mind giving me your card? I have a very important reason in asking it. So he asked the stranger for his card. Card തരാമോ എന്ന് ചോദിച്ചു. He seemed to be greatly surprised, as indeed well he might, but he granted my request. Slowly he took out his case and handed me his card and hurried on with the little girl. To hurry is to walk fastly. പെട്ടെന്ന് പോവുക. So he gave him his card, and then he hurried away with his little girl. What made Mr. Osmond give his card to the stranger? He was surprised, but maybe seeing the earnestness on the narrator's face, he granted his request. It could be because he saw that earnestness, that honesty on the narrator's face. He felt that the narrator was a sincere person, so he gave him his card. Holding the card tight in my hand, I hurried to a lonely corner of the ship and read it. My eyes grew dim, my head reeled. Reel, tala karanguga, lose balance. For on it were the words Mr. Ormond Wall with an address at Pittsburgh, USA. So എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഇയാളുടെ തല കറങ്ങുന്നത്? Why did his head reel? Because the man had the same name as the street he lived in. What is the name of the man? The name of the man is Mr. Ormond Wall. The same name as the street the narrator lived in. Narrator ജീവിക്കുന്ന സ്ട്രീറ്റിന്റെ സെയിം നെയിമാണ് ഇയാൾക്കുള്ളത്. His name is Mr. Ormond Wall. And he lived in Pittsburgh, USA. So he's from another country. I remember no more until I found myself in a hospital in Boulogne. There I lay in a broken condition for some weeks, and only a month ago did I return. So he felt sick. He felt sick because of shock കാരണം. And he was admitted to a hospital in Boulogne. He spent there Admitted for a few weeks, and only a month ago did he return. He was silent. We looked at him and at one another and waited. So everybody is looking at one another because this is a very strange story and it is a supernatural occurrence, a supernatural event. I went back, he started once again after a moment or so, to Great Osmond Street, and set to work to find out all I could about this American. I wrote to Pittsburgh, I wrote to American editors, I made friends with Americans in London, but all that I could find out was that he was a millionaire with English parents who had resided in London. So he tries to find out everything about this man. He lived in Pittsburgh, America. Since he was an American, he wrote to Pittsburgh. He wrote to American editors. He asked Americans who lived in London. എല്ലാ വഴിയിലൂടെയും ഇയാളെ പറ്റി അന്വേഷിക്കുകയാണ് because he was very curious to find out more about Mr. Ormond. What did the author find out about Mr. Ormond? He found out that he was an American millionaire from Pittsburgh with English parents who had resided in London. His parents were in London and this man was a millionaire in America. And so the time went on until yesterday morning. I had gone to bed more than usually tired and slept till late. When I woke, the room was bright with sunlight. As I always do, I looked at once at the wall on which the face is to be seen. I rubbed my eyes and sprang up. Sprang up, jump up, എണീറ്റിരിക്കുക. It was only faintly visible. So what happened one morning, the narrator woke up, he looked at the face on the wall. It was only faintly visible, which means it was not clear, it was unclear. വളരെ faint ആയിട്ട് unclear ആയിട്ടേ കാണാനുള്ളൂ. Last night it had been clear as ever. Almost I could hear it speak, and now it was the ghost of itself. So it was clear, it was very clear until last night, but today it was only faintly visible. വളരെ unclear ആയി. I got up, confused and sad, and went out. So the narrator was confused and sad, and he went out. The early editions of the newspapers, were already out. I saw the headline, American Millionaire's Motor Accident. He bought the newspapers, and what was the heading? American Millionaire's Motor Accident. Mr. Ormond Wall had got into an accident. I bought it and read, Mr. Ormond Wall, the Pittsburgh millionaire, and party motoring in Italy were hit by a wagon and the car overturned. Mr. Wall's condition was critical. Critical means in danger. Mr. Ormond Wall എന്താണ് പറ്റിയത്? He got into an accident and his condition was critical. So this was very strange. The face on the wall became unclear. It became faintly visible, and at the same time, the man with that face also got into a motor accident, and his condition was critical. Now let's take a look at the questions. I remember no more. What might have happened to the narrator? He might have fainted. He remembers no more because he fainted. ബോധം കെട്ടു വീണു. It was only faintly visible. Why? The face on the wall must have faded. That is why it was faintly visible. It was no longer clear. What happened to Mr. Wall? He and his party got into a motor accident and his condition was critical. What does critical mean? Critical means in danger. I went back to my room and sat on the bed looking with unseeing eyes on the face of the wall. Unseeing eyes? Even though his eyes are open, he cannot see anything. And even as I looked, suddenly it completely disappeared. So നോക്കിക്കൊണ്ടിരുന്നപ്പോൾ ആ face completely disappear ആവുന്നു. It completely disappeared even as he was looking at it. Box. Later, I found that Mr. Wall died of his injuries at what I take to be that very moment. Again, he was silent. So, what happened to the man? He died at that very moment. Most remarkable, we said. Most extraordinary. And so forth. And we meant it too. So, everybody says this story is remarkable. It is extraordinary. It is very strange. So the question, why does he call his eyes unseeing? Because he was thinking of the news of Mr. Ormond Wall's critical condition and the fading face on the wall. നമ്മൾ എന്തിനെ പറ്റിയെങ്കിലും ചിന്തിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ മുമ്പിലുള്ളത് കാണുന്നില്ല. So that is why his eyes are described as unseeing. Even though his eyes are open, he cannot see anything in front of him because he is thinking about something else. He is thinking about Mr. Ormond Wall's condition. Yes, said the stranger. There are three most remarkable things about my story. One is that it should be possible for a patch on the wall of a house in London not only to form the features of a gentleman in America, but also to have a close association with his life. Science will not be able to explain that yet. So what cannot be explained by science? The similarity between the face on his bedroom wall and to the face of an American millionaire. American millionaireന്റെ ഇയാളുടെ വാളിലുള്ള ഫേസും ഒരേപോലെ എന്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നു. അത് സയൻസിന് എക്സ്പ്ലെയിൻ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റില്ല. Science will not be able to explain that. Box. Another one is that the gentleman's name should bear any relation to the spot on which his features were being so curiously reproduced by some unknown agency. Is it not so? Another strange occurrence is that the gentleman had the same name as the place in which his face appeared. The street was named Ormond Street and the gentleman was named Mr. Ormond Wall. So they had the same name. That is also very strange occurrence. എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഈ സ്ട്രേറ്റിനും ഈ ജെന്റിൽമാനും രണ്ടുപേർക്കും ഒരേ പേര് വന്നത്? That is also a strange occurrence. We agreed with him, and our original discussion on supernatural occurrences set in again with increased excitement, during which the narrator of the amazing experience rose up and said good night. So they began talking about supernatural events again. What was the original discussion about? It was about supernatural occurrences. They began talking about that again. The narrator got up and said good night. Just as he was at the door, one of the company recalled us to the course of an excited debate by asking him before he left what he considered the third most exciting thing in connection with his deeply interesting story. You said 3 things, you know. So the man had said there were 3 things interesting about this story. He only mentioned 2 things. He had said there were 3 interesting things about the story. What is the third thing? Oh, the third thing, he said as he opened the door. I was forgetting that. The third extraordinary thing about the story is that I made it up about half an hour ago. Good night again. So what is the third extraordinary thing? The story is made up. The man made up the story half an hour ago. Which means it was not a true story at all. It was just a made up story. So what was the original discussion about? It was about supernatural occurrences. How does the narrator surprise at the end with this revelation that he made up the story just half an hour ago? What are the 3 most remarkable things about the story? First, that a patch on the wall of a house in London matches that of an American gentleman and is closely connected to his life. Second, the gentleman's name was related to the name of the place where his feature had appeared mysteriously. Third, that he had made it all up just then. These were the three most remarkable things about the story. So that's all for today's class. Thank you.